Let's discuss with Texas Congressman Pat Fallon and Texas State Representative Brian Harrison. Gentlemen, welcome on this Memorial Day, a blessed one to each one of you. Representative Harrison, I want to begin with you. 60 men and women who laughingly claim to be Republicans joined 61 socialists to deliver this victory to Joe Biden, who was getting nothing but lawsuits and pushback from Paxton's office amid his harmful policies, which, as you know, have been harming Texas for 2 years. Every American who voted for this, every Republican, I should say, who voted for this illegal impeachment, haven't they earned a primary challenge in the ire of their voters?
Well, let me start out by saying something here, Chris. That, like there were a 20-count indictment was dropped literally on my desk, okay, with no warning, had no idea this was coming up, along with nothing more than a transcript from one single solitary hearing that was had. There was not at any point in the impeachment proceeding a single shred of anything that even closely approximates evidence. And then I think, if my math is right, about 44 hours later, we were asked to cast a vote to overturn the election results. By the way, in the Republican primary in Texas, where Ken Paxton was overwhelmingly reelected. Okay, now the allegations are concerning. I want to be clear about that. I am concerned about the allegations. But the proceedings themselves, especially if we're going to be alleging criminal offenses and raising cries of impeachment, the proceedings themselves must be unimpeachable. They were not here. And in fact, House leadership did absolutely nothing to persuade me that this was anything other than what it looked like, which is the political railroading, or using government power to politically railroad a political enemy. It should not have been done like this, and I was proud to vote no.
Yes, the pro-Democrat Republicans were so confident in their case, they wouldn't even allow Ken Paxton to speak in his own defense. That's how rock solid it is. Congressman Fallon, President Trump called out Governor Abbott during this process. He said, missing in action, where is the governor of Texas on his attorney general's impeachment? The president also pledged that he would campaign against all of the so-called Republicans who signed on with socialists, who turned to arguably the most pro-communist, pro-socialist, pro-democrat legislative session in memory. Isn't the impeachment vote and those who defeated, for example, parental school choice, isn't that a voting guide for conservative primary voters who not to vote for? And isn't it time Texas purged the deceitful and power-hungry members of its party?
Well, Chris, I think we should impeach the impeachment process itself, because there were 20 counts, if I'm not mistaken. So there should have been 20 separate votes on each article of impeachment, number one. And that didn't happen. It was an all or nothing, which made no sense to me whatsoever. And furthermore, there's really two outcomes here, right? There's two scenarios. It's either Ken Paxton is guilty of what he's been charged with, or accused of, I should say, or he's not. And if he is or isn't, that's going to be determined by a judiciary process. And the legislature should stay in its lane and legislate. It was a rush to judgment. It made no sense to me. And personal disclosure, I've been a 15-year close friend of Ken Paxton.
Yeah, understood, Congressman. And by the way, you have a great deal of experience there in the Texas House as well. Representative Harrison, I know that you have been buried in Texas politics the last couple of months, but you spent a lot of time in the swamp. So over the weekend, it lived up to its name as the House GOP, by all accounts, caved, surrendering all reductions in spending, actually agreeing to spending increases, and even leaving the 87,000 IRS agents in place, ready to go after America's middle class. Your thoughts as America charts a uniparty course toward $51 trillion in debt in the next 10 years?
Yeah, sometimes it seems like we have too much of a uniparty problem in Austin as well as Washington. And speaking of those 87,000 agents, I actually think that's a nice tie into what we were talking about before, which is the politicization, or the criminalization, I should say, of political opposition. In America, we're supposed to be defeating our opponents in the arena of ideas. And instead, from the January 6th Commission to the FBI raiding President Trump's home in a wholly unprecedented fashion, I'm very concerned about we're taking America in a direction of third world countries and tin pot dictators where due process, is disregarded, and rights and freedoms of otherwise free people are being thrown aside by the ruling elite who govern by edict. And if you think this couldn't happen to you, if you think this is something that would only happen to, somebody like Donald Trump or Ken Paxton, just think about the fact that the IRS, even under this deal, is going to hire 87,000 IRS agents to enforce a 67,000-page tax code that exactly 0 Americans understand. Now, look, with regards to this deal, I'm glad we finally got something. We have had 8 or 9 debt deals in our recent history where we got absolutely nothing from it. But let me tell you, this whole phobia, this fear, this panic of a default, if there was going to be a default, there would only be one person responsible for that, and that would be President Joe Biden. Look, I helped oversee a couple brief shutdowns during my time in the Trump administration. I can tell you the government has the ability to reprogram money. There's always enough money coming in to pay our debts, and this never should have been a panic. And I'm glad we at least got something, but we definitely didn't get anywhere near as much as I would have liked to see.
Right, and by law, we're required not to default. So that was always a red herring in my view. Congressman Fallon, last thing. Speaker McCarthy defending the deal, saying it's simple. Joe Biden wanted to spend more and raise taxes. Republicans fought and won to reduce spending and stop Biden from radical overreach. The systemic reforms we set in place mark the beginning of historic change in Washington. But Congressman, that's just simply not true, is it? In fact, the deal maintains Joe Biden's destructive level of spending the next year and increases it by 1% the year following. What exactly did conservatives get out of this deal?
Well, Chris, it could have been, it's one of those things where it could have been a lot worse. But is it good enough to vote yes on? And that's the question that we all have to wrestle with. I would have liked to have seen the illegal and unconstitutional and very expensive debt forgiveness program, or I should say, debt moving the responsibility to pay student loan debt to other people that never went to college. So that was $400 billion, and that's still in there, and that's unfortunate. I wanted to see the REINS Act in there as well. Unfortunately, neither of those things were in, and we have a $31 trillion debt. We need to get serious about balancing our budget, and I know we can't do that overnight, but we should have at least a 5 or 7 year plan, and that didn't happen. We do have divided government, but it's hard to throw your support. Listen, I appreciate the efforts that they made, and Joe Biden sat on his rear end for 90 days and caused this this 11th hour negotiation. It should never happen that way. But we need also, Chris, work requirements for Medicaid recipients. And that's unfortunately not in there as well. So it's just hard to vote yes on something like this.
I understand. And, Joe Biden is going to be rewarded for sitting on his duff for 90 days. And that's the legacy, I'm sad to say, of a Republican Party and, frankly, a Democrat Party that is unworthy of the fallen heroes that we remember today. Congressman Pat Fallon and State Representative Brian Harrison, gentlemen, thank you very much. Appreciate your time.